World Individuals Debating and Public Speaking Championships 2015 to deliver his closing remarks. Mr. Allen, please.
Honourable Chief Justice Mr. Geoffrey, Mrs. Lau, distinguished guests, parents, coaches and students. It is a most humbling feeling to be here today on the stage in this great hall of learning. I am overwhelmed by such a large show of support from so many different sectors of the community. I can just say thanks for coming out on this day. It is just a wonderful experience to be standing here. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you, Mrs. Lau, for your warmth and generosity in providing this community with so much support, expertise and flair for today's event. I know how hard your students and staff have worked to help make this Grand Finals event a success, not just over the past few weeks, but in the months before the event. I'm deeply grateful for the contribution of every single member of your school community. Without you, we would not be sitting here today in this magnificent auditorium, whose beauty you have so lovingly prepared for us today. It is your team's sacrifice of countless hours of service, meticulous attention to detail, and absolute pride in every aspect of your work that has made this possible. We do indeed appreciate the vibrancy of the DGS spirit, which moves among us here in so many ways in this room today. Thank you very much. To Dr. Chan, Brother Steve, and Mr. Lee, I also offer my sincere thanks to your communities for opening your doors and hearts to us this week. On so many occasions, you have made our guests from all over the world feel welcome in corridors and halls and classrooms, with smiling faces, and provided us with so much generous support. I speak on behalf of all the participants here today in expressing my gratitude to each and every member of the staff of your schools who helped us from St. Paul's Co-Ed, La Salle College and Young. Your service for us has been amazing. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank some people who are very dear to my heart. That is Audrey Au and the members of her family. Her sisters, Lucille and Sharon, her husband Peter Ho, and daughter Petra Ho, for being our foundation stone and inspiration. Without their limitless work in legally establishing our organisation as a fully functioning charity, the Hong Kong Schools Debating and Public Community Speaking Limited, our dreams of holding these World Championships would not have been fulfilled, would not be possible. You people, you wonderful family, have taken us from being a few people with a few ideas to a seriously credible organisation with official status in this city. And as a result of that, we have been able to develop stronger relationships with so many individuals, organisations and companies. Also, through thick and thin, it has been your wise counsel, open generosity and undying faith in us that have carried us to this point, to this grand occasion. For all this, our community is most thankful, and for me personally, I can't thank you enough for your kindness and devotion to our vision. Thank you so much. So why then is today's event so important in our lives? It's a celebration of the spirit of youth, which is for me always the spirit of optimism to make the world a better place. I speak not just to our international guests, but to all the students here from so many schools. And I recognise a lot of you from our tournaments and so on. Ultimately, we are sitting here in this auditorium today because of you. It is your passion for this thing we call debating and public speaking that has driven all of us to be at this point and united us all in the belief that the spoken word does matter. It does bring positive change. It is a belief that words spoken, unmediated by machines, do make a difference. A belief that in this age of social media devices and the power of a good speech holds its place, just as it has down through the centuries of human history. Now, this belief often leads to an act of courage. The coaches here today will be able to recall, no doubt, the first timid knock on their classroom door from a small child asking to join this debate team or enter that public speaking competition. That's the courage of youth, of a young person saying, I want a voice in this world. And when that courage is met with the commitment, skill and passion of a teacher, a powerful union is formed and anything becomes possible. Whether you are sitting here today as a member of the audience, having knocked on that door just last week, or are one of the grand finalists for whom this is a distant memory, it is your act of courage in seeking a voice that unites us all here today. That's why this event is so important. My message to you today is simple. Continue with courage to bang on the doors of opportunity. Keep striving for a voice of justice, for those high notes that can bring positive change. And, above all, maintain your passion for the spoken word. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise today proud to oppose a motion whose good intentions merely serve to mask a cruel irony. That irony is that a motion grounded in feminism and seeking to improve the status of women instead does nothing more than reek of rank paternalism. Let me be absolutely clear. This motion demeans women ambassadors by treating them as tokens, even as it does no good to the women it is intended to help. In order to prove that to you today, I will begin by refuting the constructive points made by the Prime Minister before outlining the opposition's entire constructive case and delving into the first point of that case. Now, the Prime Minister began her speech by asking the question, how? And I have a similar question. That question is, how will this motion improve the status of women in discriminating questions? And it is a question the government must and so far has not answered. Additionally, the Prime Minister said three things. She claimed that the burden of fixing this falls on the liberal democracies, except she let that stand only as an assertion, and we do not believe that an assertion should therefore stand. Secondly, in response to my POI, she never gave a yes or no answer, and that's because she knows the answer is yes. This is the product of the neoconservative mindset, and although we are glad that we are now using ambassadors rather than bombs, she does not differ in mindset from George W. Bush. She differs only in terms of degree. Now finally, the Right Honourable Lady said that we should use diplomacy to advance feminism. As a matter of fact, we agree, but we believe in the United States that should be done through the policy wing of the State Department, not the Human Resources Department at State. She never claimed why female ambassadors are more capable of advancing feminism than male ambassadors. And in fact, given the unfortunately higher status of males in some traditional societies, we would argue that that claim that females will pay more attention, especially when they just get their marching orders from ministers back home, is simply not true. Now that I have refuted the points made by the Prime Minister, I would like to continue into our own constructive case. We believe that in proposing the ultimate affirmative action policy, the government has a twofold burden of proof. First, they must show that this policy will accomplish its stated aims in improving the status of women in discriminating countries. And second, we believe that it will do so without doing great harm. We oppose because we think it fails both tests. We believe, on the one hand, that this motion is harmful to the status of women in developing countries, and on the other, it is harmful both to the practice of diplomacy and to the careers of our highly competent female diplomats. I myself will talk about this first, dangerous harm. Yes?
What does it look like to women in a nation that they're being discriminated against, when the only person that other nations feel can campaign for their rights is a man?
I will answer that question in my first constructive point, and I thank her for it. It's an excellent point. Now, as I said, I will now move on into my first constructive point. And this sort of logic that the Right Honorable Lady just raises underlies much of their case. They say, won't there be strong female role models in these countries for girls to look up to? Won't there be strong female counterparts for men in positions of power? Of course there will, but there's something they forget. These women will mostly be wealthy, mostly be white, mostly be highly educated, and will all be the products of these same advanced liberal democracies that these discriminating countries, rightly or wrongly, associate with economic, political, and yes, cultural imperialism. This will have two disastrous effects. First, for girls in these developing countries, it will present them with a false choice, a choice between feminist ideals and between their own traditional culture. Feminism is not only a Western thing, it is not only a liberal thing, but if we, through these ambassadors, no thank you, make it look that way, more girls will choose the culture of their mother and their father rather than feminism. And so, even though we will gain new advocates in places like Riyadh and Islamabad and Baghdad, we will do so at the cost of real grassroots activists in the provinces. It is not worth another Hillary Clinton if, as a result, we lose 10 Malalas.
We would never give them any choice to choose feminism, to choose their own rights, when they do not have a female role model in a position of power.
I actually trust that women can educate themselves, especially in the age of the internet. Now, moving on. Even if they have these role models, even if they couldn't educate themselves and they need Western women to look up to, even if discriminating in traditional countries don't have strong women, which isn't true, even then, this motion would harm feminism. That's because there is a twofold process to achieving equality. The first part is advocacy, and the second is cultural acceptance. And that second part would be very grievously harmed. You see, the sort of mindset that I critiqued in my POI is a mindset which is all too prevalent in our current world, a clash of civilizations mindset, if you will. And so, if the men who hold power in these traditional societies prove that that is the dominant dynamic, the word feminist will become even more of an epithet, even more of an outsider in countries like Russia, much of the Arab world, and parts of Africa. That is harmful to feminism. It is harmful to the status of women, because in countries like my own, in places like the United States and Great Britain, women achieved rights, voting rights, only 100 years ago. And they did so because the males who unfortunately had all the power in society accepted those rights. We believe that feminism is more acceptable to the males who are the powerful actors if it comes from the home, the household, rather than overseas. Princes and emirs are more likely to listen to their wives than to foreign ambassadors serving as missionaries. This mistake, this mindset, is something that the West has done over and over again in dealing with the developed world. We believe the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I do not oppose feminism, but I cannot support insanity. Madam Speaker, I beg to oppose.
Honored guests, teachers, friends, and students from overseas. Last Sunday, it was my great pleasure to welcome you to the 2015 World Individuals Debating and Public Speaking Championship in Hong Kong. We are immensely proud to be your host for this meaningful adventure. All too soon, the past few days have flashed by with preliminary rounds, finals, and I'm sure also some sightseeing and culinary delights to enable you to get a taste and feel of our city. Once again, it is my privilege to speak to you here on behalf of the student community. I say privilege rather than pleasure because I find a particular joy in this speech. It is always a bittersweet feeling to herald the end of what has been an incredible experience for all of us involved. Instead, I will dwell on this week's happy moments, and so indulge me again as I reminisce thank you, and bid you all farewell. First of all, special thanks to our adjudicators. I hope the amazing performances from our worldwide community of competitors has made this all worthwhile, and you will take with you fond memories of your time here. And as to all of our competitors, I hope you had as much fun as I did competing in the previous few years. Representing your country is a huge honor, and you've all done yourselves proud. To those who have returned home with silverware, a warm congratulations, as I know too well the time, the effort, and the heart that you must have put into your winning performances. To those returning next year, I wish you all every success. And to those for whom this is your last tournament, I hope that you will truly treasure the events of this week. To all of our overseas friends, I wish you all a safe journey home and hope that you will come here to visit us again soon. But more importantly, you will take home with you something far more valuable and far more enduring: the world individual's experience. The knowledge that you have competed against the best and the brightest in your pursuit for excellence, the warm memories of old friendships renewed and new friendships forged, and the understanding that the true winners of this week are reasoned thought and the spoken word. Last but not least, it is time to honor those who helped to realize the dream that was this tournament. Allow me to offer you a heartfelt thank you. Without further ado, allow me to introduce to you our keynote speaker, the Honorable Chief Justice Geoffrey Ma, also the honorary patron of the Hong Kong Schools Debating and Public Speaking Community. Thank you.
Keynote speech. Chief Justice Ma, please.
Mrs. Lau, Mr. Abhishek, Mr. Allen, distinguished guests, contestants, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, the first tip I can give you about public speaking is make sure your health is good and that your voice doesn't run out. I'm afraid I'm sounding a little hoarse, and that's through my own fault for getting a cold. I was feeling a little left out just now because I didn't think I was going to get the double escort to make sure that I ended up on stage, because normally people would head straight for the exit. Like this. Now, we've heard opening remarks from Mrs. Lau. We've heard closing remarks from Mr. Allen. We've heard an inspirational speech from Mr. Evershed. And Petra has given me the best introduction possible. It's such a stirring introduction that I feel that I'm letting everybody down. In speaking, they didn't really know what to call my speech, so better to use the modern term, which is keynote speech, which actually means nothing to most people. Because I'm sure you're all wondering why. What sort of keynote speech is he going to make? Is it going to be a witty one? Which category does it fall under? Is it interpretive? Is it persuasive? And so on. I mean, is it an after-dinner speech? Is it impromptu? It can't be impromptu. By the way, I'm showing the notes to the judges because I noticed some of the rules about size of notes. You can't have it too large. You have to fold it into card size, like So I wonder what it is that I ought to be talking about. And I thought the safest thing is to be boring, because at least you can't be criticized for being boring. I know the laughter is perhaps polite. I'm not used to such a nice audience. And of course, it's a great privilege, always, to be here. Mrs. Lau only has to ask, and I will be here at the stroke of, well, in anything. I had the privilege of making a speech during speech day at DGS some years back, The day before, I made almost the same speech at DBS, and it's a real privilege to be here at DGS, where I must say the surroundings are, well, let's put it politely, a little better than they are at DBS. But it's not, and so I've broken a rule already of the speakers, which is that you're meant not to foment any hate or anything like that, or disparage anyone. So, I am going to talk about something boring, and that is communication. And this is really what speech is about. Almost 50 years to the day was the first time I made a public speech, and that was at a competition. There was no knock at the door of the headmaster or the principal asking to participate in public speaking. It doesn't work that way. The way it works, or rather used to work, is that you get pulled out and you're told that you've got to do public speaking. It's not a matter of choice. So this rather romantic notion of a little boy knocking faintly at the principal's door is, as far as I can see, pure fiction. 10 years after that, when I was near 20, just to allay people's fears, I'm 59. About 40 years ago, at my university at Birmingham, I was asked, could you please participate in a mooting competition? Mooting is a form of legal debate, as some of you will know. And I was asked to do this at Gray's Inn, which ended up being my Inn of Court. All barristers in England had to join an Inn of Court. So I volunteered. I had to pay whatever it cost to join the inn. I wasn't actually asked to join in the moot. I was actually ordered to participate in the moot. Now that was the first time, I think, I did any form of public speaking under pressure. See, it is hardest, public speaking or any form of speaking, if you're under some sort of pressure. The contestants this afternoon will feel the pressure because they have the pressure of performing well, they have the pressure of perhaps wanting desperately to win. And so it was with me 40 years ago in that moot at night at Gray's Inn against Cambridge University. Now I did something then which in any public speaking event I've not done since, and that is to have a few drinks beforehand. Give me Dutch courage. The only drink I've had, which I probably still need now, is water. Now since then, since the moot took place, the competition, I became a lawyer, I became a barrister. That was entirely my choice. And barristers, as lawyers will tell you, spend their lives doing public speaking. And it is public speaking of perhaps the hardest kind, and that is trying to persuade somebody, meaning the court or a judge, of the correctness of your submissions in a pressurized situation, because usually it's either your client's liberty or your client's money at stake. And that's what I learned after years practicing at the bar. I practiced for about 20 years before I retired from the bar and became a judge. The importance of communication. Now, communication of what? Now, communication of what depends on what it is you're seeking to achieve. Because in a poetry reading, you are seeking to convey pathos, drama. In a company meeting, you are seeking to convey information. In a legal setting, and indeed many other settings, you are communicating in order to persuade somebody of the correctness of your point of view. Now, so you have different forms, different approaches depending on the occasion. It's not a one-size-fits-all sort of situation. Although, having said that, there are characteristics which are similar, whichever form of speaking you do. Now, I've come up with about 6 common features of communication which are important, whatever it is you do. The first, of course, is to grab the attention of your audience. I'm addressing all of you at the moment. For the contestants, they'll be looking at that white table about 5 rows down. That's where the judges are. In real life, you are looking at your audience and you want to grab their attention. Now, if I had to choose an event to take part in, if I were a contestant this afternoon, I would have chosen interpretive and then chosen a poem to go with it. And before you do that, I would have laid out the setting. I would have reminded everybody that we're 2015, 100 years since one of the worst battles in the First World War. Anzac Day, I think it's going to be celebrated. Well, not celebrated, remembered in Australia later this month. And with a sort of introduction like that, I've then gone into what, for me, is one of the most touching poems I can think of. I don't know whether that's going to be used this afternoon. It begins, in Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, and then it carries on. It's a poem by a Canadian poet, Lieutenant General John McCrae. So you capture the attention by whatever means of your particular audience. The second factor is this, that distractions. DGS is very good because it provides this lecture which covers most of me. That's not in any sort of indecent sense, but many of you will have occasions when you won't have the benefit of this big table. People will be able to look at you rather like this. Now, you get the point. When you see anybody who is speaking without the benefit of this, like the two ladies over there, you can easily get distracted. And in public speaking, the one thing that is distracting are the feet and the shoes. And how you stand really does matter because, like it or not, when people are looking at you as you speak, people are actually looking at your feet more than looking at your face. Distractions are therefore to be avoided, either dressing inappropriately. In an English-speaking contest, the biggest distraction is not being grammatical, so that people are then preoccupied with the fact that you don't speak well, you have a lack of grammar, and so on. So no distractions. The third is the audience must feel relaxed, because although I am speaking to you now, the important, it's not a dialogue in the sense that you are not speaking to me, but it must appear as though we're having a chat. So the audience must feel relaxed. Now, how do you make somebody relax? You can't force someone to feel relaxed. The easiest way is, I'm looking at Petra now, is to smile. And she smiles back and waves back. Now, smiling, I think, matters. Appearing calm matters, because you don't really listen to people if they sound very excitable, or they are moving all the time, or like me, my hands are just waving around. It's best to keep your hands away. So it's part of a non-distraction, but mainly to make the audience feel relaxed. Now, you need to concentrate, because as soon as you lose concentration, all is lost, particularly those who will be participating in the impromptu speaking. Concentration is key, and you must never lose that. Structure, I don't know how many notes I've seen talk about structure. Structure is all important. You have a beginning, you have a meat, and you have an end. You're dealing with a couple of themes. Make sure you do obviously have a structure. And don't forget time. Everybody works under limited time. I was given a benefit, actually, Roy Allen, said, oh, you can make a speech between 10 and 20 minutes. Well, life's not really like that, because very often you are just given a few minutes to speak. In one of the greatest courts there are in the world, this is the Supreme Court of the United States, lawyers are given no more than 20 minutes or 25 minutes to speak. So make most of that. There are a number of, I think, red herrings. People assume that you get better marks if you speak, you're speaking English, with an English accent. Accents really don't matter. What matters, of course, in the communication is what you say. I'm reminded of this by a most stirring speech, one of the most stirring speeches I've ever heard. It comes from a film. I don't know how many of you have watched a film called Gladiator. Well, I hear some mumbles, so that means most of you have. In one of the sort of most key scenes, which I think people after a few beers laugh at, is when Russell Crowe begins by saying, I am Maximus Decimus Meridius, leader of the armies of the North, loyal servant of the known true emperor. Now, that's a very dramatic moment, but he does it in an Australian accent. Despite that, it is full of pathos and, for me, drama. Of course, after a while, you do laugh. Communication by words is all important. It will always be important. However developed all forms of technology are, everybody uses an iPhone, keying each other and so apping each other. Oral communication is going to be the most important of all. After all, how else can you say, look at someone, I'm not looking at anybody in particular, say I love you without actually saying it rather than acting